A billionaire thought he had everything money could buy until a stranger's hug taught him what his daughter truly needed. The billionaire father sat on a wooden bench near the playground, his expensive phone pressed to his ear, his eyes darting between his daughter and the glowing screen. It was supposed to be a rare, quiet Saturday. His assistants had begged him to take the day off. His daughter had pleaded with him to go somewhere fun, and for once, he gave in. He told himself he was doing this for her, to be a good father, but even now he couldn't resist answering work calls. His mind was still wrapped around numbers, contracts, and deadlines while his little girl laughed and ran with the other children. His daughter, no older than 6, had a bubbly laugh that could catch anyone's attention. She was full of energy, climbing the monkey bars, running across the swings, her pigtails bouncing as she moved. The park wasn't anything fancy, just a small public playground beside a family-owned diner with a few benches and a sandbox. To the billionaire, it was nothing compared to the luxury resorts he usually took her to. But his daughter didn't care. She loved the freedom of this ordinary playground. To her, this place was magical. He loosened his tie, sighing into the phone, negotiating some deal worth millions. His voice was calm and sharp, while his eyes flicked back and forth, checking on his little girl. She had climbed to the top of a slide, her small hands gripping the railing tightly. She shouted to him, "Daddy, look!" Her voice was full of pride. He raised a hand, pretending he was paying attention, but his mind was still stuck on his call. He gave her a distracted smile, and that was enough for her. She giggled and slid down, landing with a thud. Moments later, she tried something braver. The jungle gym stood tall, its metal bars hot under the afternoon sun. She climbed higher than usual, her tiny sneakers searching for a firm step. She wanted her father to look up, to really see her, to be impressed. But just as she reached for the top bar, her grip slipped. Her small body fell, hitting the ground hard. A sharp cry pierced the air. The sound was so raw and sudden that even the billionaire's voice caught in his throat. His phone call became background noise. His daughter was lying on the ground, her knees scraped, her face red with tears. He jumped to his feet, his heart racing, but before he could even reach her, someone else had moved faster. A young waitress, dressed in a simple uniform with her apron still tied around her waist, rushed from the diner's back door. She must have been on a short break, sitting nearby with a sandwich in her hand when she noticed the fall. Without hesitation, she ran across the playground and knelt beside the little girl. "It's okay, sweetheart." "You're okay," the waitress whispered gently, her arms wrapping around the crying child. She pulled the girl close, brushing the dust off her hair, rubbing her back with a comforting rhythm only a caregiver would know. The child buried her face into the waitress's shoulder, her sobs slowly softening. The billionaire stopped in his tracks, frozen. He had always believed money could solve anything: hospitals, private doctors, the best nannies, but in this moment, no amount of wealth could match the simple warmth of a stranger's hug. He stood a few steps away, watching as his daughter clung to this young woman as though she had known her all her life. The waitress didn't ask who the girl belonged to. She didn't wait for permission. She acted out of pure instinct, her heart leading her before her mind even caught up. She whispered calming words, kissed the girl's forehead, and checked her knees carefully. There was a scrape, nothing too deep, but to the little girl it felt like the end of the world. The waitress blew gently on the wound, the way mothers often do, and the girl managed a shaky giggle through her tears. "See? You're brave," the waitress told her. "Falling just means you were trying something new." The billionaire finally reached them, his shadow falling over both of them. He bent down, his voice trembling slightly. "Sweetheart, are you okay?" he asked, brushing his daughter's cheek with his hand. The girl looked at him with watery eyes, but didn't let go of the waitress. She sniffled and nodded slowly. The billionaire's chest tightened. For years, he had provided his daughter with everything: clothes from the best designers, toys flown in from other countries, private tutors, but this moment showed him something he hadn't given her enough of: presence. He looked at the waitress, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, her uniform wrinkled from a long shift. She didn't look wealthy, but there was something about her calmness, the way she gave comfort without expecting anything. That struck him deeply. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice heavier than usual. He was a man used to commanding boardrooms, but now he sounded unsure, almost humbled. The waitress shook her head with a small smile. "Don't thank me. I just couldn't stand by when she was crying." She adjusted the girl on her lap, still rubbing her back. The little girl, still sniffling, finally leaned away. But she didn't let go of the waitress's hand. She looked up at her father, her voice small but steady. "Daddy, she helped me. She hugged me." Those words hit him harder than any business deal ever had. His daughter's smile was brighter now, her fear replaced with trust, not in him but in a woman they didn't even know. He realized in that moment how much his daughter craved simple human affection. It's a kind he had been too busy to give fully. He stood there, unable to look away, his mind spinning. He thought about how strange it was that in the middle of an ordinary park, in a corner of the city he rarely visited, his daughter had found comfort in someone he might never have noticed otherwise. He was the kind of man who dined at the most expensive restaurants, stayed in luxury hotels, and yet here was a waitress from a small diner who had shown his daughter the kind of care he couldn't. The girl wiped her eyes, still holding tightly to the waitress's hand. "Can I sit with her a little more, Daddy?" she asked softly. The billionaire's throat felt dry. He nodded. "Of course." The waitress chuckled gently. "Just until she feels better. Then she should get some water and maybe a little rest." The billionaire didn't know what else to say. He sat down on the grass beside them, loosening his expensive jacket, and for the first time in a long time, he simply watched. Watched his daughter smile again. Watched a stranger's kindness fill a gap he hadn't realized was there. Watched the way his little girl's tiny hand clung to the waitress's. It's unwilling to let go. He realized something important in that quiet moment. Love and care could not be bought. They were given freely, without price, without condition. And that hug, simple, spontaneous, filled with warmth, was worth more than all the riches he had accumulated in his life. And so, the billionaire stayed there, on the playground grass, letting the phone in his pocket buzz with unanswered calls, while his daughter leaned on the shoulder of a young woman who had taught him more about humanity in a few minutes than he had learned in years of chasing success. The little girl had stopped crying, though her cheeks were still red, and her small hands held on tightly to the waitress's fingers. The billionaire father felt an odd mixture of relief and discomfort. He was grateful, but he also felt strangely out of place watching his daughter trust a stranger so easily. He cleared his throat, trying to find the right words. But before he could speak again, the waitress smiled and gently helped the girl to her feet. "There we go," she said kindly. "See, you're strong. Just a little tumble, nothing you can't handle." The girl looked down at her scraped knee and then up at the waitress. "It still hurts," she whispered. The waitress bent down, brushed some dirt off the cut, and said, "Hurts now, but it will feel better soon. Brave kids like you heal faster." She winked. And the little girl actually giggled. The billionaire noticed how quickly the waitress could turn tears into laughter. It struck him that this woman had no idea who he was. She wasn't impressed by his expensive suit or his polished shoes. She was only focused on making a child feel safe. That realization unsettled him in a way he didn't expect. "Thank you again," he finally managed to say. His voice was softer than usual, lacking the usual confidence he carried in business meetings. The waitress shook her head again. "Really, it's nothing. I just couldn't ignore her." She glanced at the diner behind her. "I should probably get back before my break ends," before she could step away. The billionaire's daughter clutched her hand tighter. "Don't go yet," she pleaded. Her big eyes looked up at her father. "Daddy, can she stay a little longer?" The billionaire hesitated, unsure how to respond. He looked at the waitress, who gave a small, apologetic smile. "I really do need to get back, sweetheart. People are waiting for their food." The girl frowned. "But I like you." Those 3 words made the billionaire's chest tighten again. His daughter said them with such honesty, as though this woman had already become important to her. The waitress crouched down and brushed the girl's hair back gently. "I like you too. And guess what? I work right over there. You can come see me anytime." She pointed to the diner, its neon sign buzzing faintly in the afternoon light. The girl nodded slowly, though she didn't look entirely happy to let go. Still, she released the waitress's hand. The woman stood up, gave the billionaire a polite nod, and hurried back to the diner. The girl watched her until the door closed behind her, then turned back to her father with a hopeful look. "Daddy, can we go eat there, please?" she asked. The billionaire was surprised by the request. Normally, his daughter begged to go to fancy places with ice cream fountains or play areas. Now she wanted to eat at a small family diner. He looked at the building. It was nothing remarkable, just a cozy little place with large windows and simple decorations. But his daughter's pleading eyes softened him. "All right," he said, adjusting his jacket. "Let's go." The girl grabbed his hand, pulling him eagerly toward the diner. As they entered, a soft jingle rang from the bell above the door. The air inside was warm and filled with the smell of freshly cooked food burgers, sizzling pies, baking, coffee brewing. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt inviting. The billionaire glanced around. Families sat at booths, chatting over plates of fries. A few older men sipped coffee at the counter. The atmosphere was relaxed, almost like stepping into another world far away from glass. Towers and boardrooms, the waitress spotted them almost immediately. Her eyes widened slightly. Then she smiled warmly. "Well, hello again," she said, walking over with a notepad in her hand. "Decided to try our food, huh?" The little girl grinned. Daddy said yes. The waitress chuckled and led them to a booth by the window. "Good choice. The pie here is the best." The billionaire sat stiffly at first, unused to such casual surroundings. He noticed how quickly the waitress slipped back into her role, balancing trays, taking orders, and refilling cups with practiced ease. She didn't treat him differently from anyone else, even though his tailored suit made him stand out. She simply did her job with a genuine smile. When she returned to take their order, the girl spoke before her father could. "Can I have pie, please? The one you said was the best." The waitress laughed softly. "Of course. One slice of apple pie for the little lady. And for you, sir?" The billionaire scanned the menu, though he wasn't really hungry. He finally said, "Just coffee." The waitress nodded, jotting it down quickly. Coming right up, as she walked away, the little girl leaned across the table and whispered, "Daddy, she's really nice. Don't you think?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, she is." The girl smiled proudly, as though she had just made a new friend and wanted her father to approve. The billionaire found himself watching the waitress more closely now. She moved quickly, balancing trays stacked with plates, yet she never looked flustered. When a child dropped a fork, she picked it up with a laugh and brought a new one. When an elderly man spilled coffee, she cleaned it without a single complaint. There was a grace in her simplicity, a strength in her smile. She wasn't faking it to impress anyone. She was just real. The billionaire thought about how different her world was from his own. She probably made in a week what he spent on a single business lunch. Yet, in this diner, she carried herself with more sincerity than many of the powerful people he dealt with daily. When she finally brought their food, the girl clapped her hands. The pie looked warm and golden, steam rising from it. The waitress set it down gently and placed the coffee in front of the father. "Enjoy," she said. Giving them both a friendly smile before moving to another table, the girl took a big bite of pie and closed her eyes in delight. "She was right, Daddy. This is the best pie ever." The billionaire sipped his coffee, though his thoughts were elsewhere. He kept glancing at the waitress, watching how she managed everything at once. It was strange, he usually didn't notice people like her. But now, after seeing how she hugged his daughter, he couldn't stop noticing. His daughter chattered happily between bites. "I want to come here again. I like it here. And I like her." The billionaire smiled faintly. He didn't fully understand why, but he felt drawn to this place too. Maybe it was because his daughter was happy. Maybe it was because the waitress had shown kindness without hesitation. Or maybe it was because something inside him was beginning to shift. Something he hadn't felt in a long time, that afternoon. Sitting in a simple diner booth with his daughter, he realized life could feel different outside the world of wealth and pressure. And it all began with the moment his daughter fell, and a stranger reached out to help. The billionaire had not planned to return to the small diner. He told himself it was just a one-time stop because his daughter had begged him. Yet the very next day, after a morning filled with unanswered emails and restless pacing in his mansion, his daughter tugged at his sleeve and asked again, "Daddy, can we go back to the place with the pie?" Please, her big eyes filled with hope, made it impossible for him to say no. So he drove her back to the same little corner diner, far away from the five-star restaurants he normally chose. The bell above the door jingled again as they entered, and immediately his daughter's face lit up. She spotted the waitress behind the counter, balancing a tray of milkshakes. The young woman turned, saw them, and gave a small, surprised smile. She didn't say anything right away, but her eyes softened, as if she was happy to see the little girl again. The girl ran ahead, calling, "Hi." "We came back." The waitress laughed gently, setting the tray down on another table before walking over. She bent down to the child's level and said, "Well, aren't I lucky? Back so soon?" The billionaire followed, more slowly, adjusting his cufflinks as though to remind himself of who he was. But somehow, in this diner, he felt less like a man of power and more like just a father following his daughter's lead. They sat at the same booth by the window. The waitress handed them menus, though the little girl didn't bother looking. "I want pie again," she announced proudly. The waitress chuckled. "Pie it is." "And for you, sir?" The billionaire paused. Yesterday he had only ordered coffee, but today he found himself saying, "A burger, please." It felt unusual, almost strange, to order something so simple. As the waitress walked away, his daughter leaned across the table, whispering with a grin, "She remembered us." The father smiled faintly but said nothing. When the food arrived, the girl dug into her pie while the billionaire studied his plate. The burger was simple, nothing like the gourmet meals he usually had, but when he took the first bite, he was surprised. It tasted comforting in a way he hadn't expected. His eyes drifted to the waitress again. She was moving quickly, filling glasses, clearing plates, but she still found time to smile at every customer. She stopped to chat with an older couple, laughed with a group of teenagers, and crouched down to help a small boy who had spilled his juice. There was something steady and warm about her. Over the next few days, this became a pattern. His daughter would ask to go back, and each time he gave in more easily. The diner became their spot. The girl grew more attached to the waitress with every visit. Sometimes she would bring drawings she had made at home and proudly hand them over. The waitress always took the time to admire them, sticking them on the bulletin board near the counter. The billionaire noticed that his daughter's laughter came more freely here than anywhere else. She would chatter endlessly to the waitress, telling her about her toys, her school, even her dreams. The waitress listened patiently, never brushing her off, as though each word mattered. One afternoon, when the diner was quieter, the billionaire found himself asking questions. He watched the waitress wipe down their table after they finished eating. Something in him wanted to know more. "You work long hours," he said, almost as a statement rather than a question. She shrugged lightly. "Double shifts, most days." "It's tiring, but it pays the bills." "For yourself?" he asked, curious. Her smile softened, though it carried a hint of sadness. "For my siblings, I'm the oldest. After our parents passed, it's been on me to keep things together. My brother's in high school, my sister's still little. Someone has to make sure they have what they need." The billionaire was quiet. He was not a man who often listened to personal stories. Most people around him only spoke of profits, strategies, and goals. But her words sank into him. She wasn't complaining, wasn't asking for pity. She said it simply, as if it was just her reality. "How do you manage?" he asked, almost without thinking. The waitress smiled again, a little tired but genuine. "One day at a time. Some days are harder, but they're worth it. My siblings are worth it." His daughter, who had been listening quietly, piped up, "That's so nice. You're like a hero." The waitress laughed softly. "I don't know about a hero. Just doing what I can." The billionaire studied her face, the lines of exhaustion hidden behind her steady smile. He thought about the people he usually met, powerful, wealthy, confident. Yet none of them carried this quiet strength. None of them could have knelt on a playground and hugged his daughter without hesitation. That night, after he tucked his daughter into bed, he sat alone in his study. The house was silent, filled with expensive furniture, polished wood, and glittering chandeliers. Yet it felt strangely empty. He thought about the waitress's words, about how she carried her siblings on her shoulders, about how she worked tirelessly without complaint. He wondered if he could ever be that strong. He had money, yes, more than most people could imagine. But when it came to being present, being needed in the way his daughter needed him, he wasn't sure he measured up the following weekend. His daughter asked to go again, and he didn't hesitate this time. They arrived at the diner, and the waitress greeted them warmly, almost like family now. His daughter ran into her arms without shyness, and the billionaire didn't stop her. In fact, he found himself smiling. As they ate, he asked more questions, genuinely curious. He learned that the waitress had once dreamed of becoming a teacher, but had put her studies on hold after losing her parents. She wanted to return to school someday, but for now, her priority was keeping her siblings fed and clothed. The billionaire listened carefully. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer solutions. He just listened, and it felt new to him. In business, he was always the one giving orders, making decisions. But here with her, he found value in simply hearing another person's truth. His daughter beamed throughout the conversation, happy to see her father paying attention to someone she admired. She leaned her head on his shoulder, pie crumbs still on her lips, and whispered. The billionaire nodded. Slowly, the billionaire nodded slowly. He couldn't explain it fully, but he agreed. The waitress was special not because of wealth or success, but because of her heart. By the time they left the diner that day, something had shifted inside him. The playground accident that had started everything now seemed like fate. It had led them here to this small diner, to a woman who lived a life so different from his, yet somehow managed to teach him lessons he hadn't even realized he needed. He held his daughter's hand as they walked back to the car. And for once, he wasn't thinking about business meetings or contracts. He was thinking about pie, about laughter, about resilience, and about the way a stranger's kindness had begun to change the way he saw the world. One chilly evening, the billionaire noticed his daughter wasn't her usual energetic self. She was quiet in the back seat of the car, her little head resting against the window. He asked her gently, "Sweetheart, are you okay?" She nodded, but her face was pale, and he knew something was wrong. By the time they got home, she was running a fever. His heart tightened with worry. Normally, he would have called the private doctor immediately. But for some reason, his first thought was of the young waitress at the diner. His daughter whispered, her voice weak, "Daddy, can we go see her?" "She'll know what to do." The billionaire hesitated. It was unusual to think of a waitress instead of a doctor, but the trust in his daughter's eyes was undeniable. She truly believed the woman who had hugged her at the playground could make things better. And so, without overthinking, he drove back to the diner. When they arrived, the bell above the door jingled as always. The waitress looked up, surprised to see them at such a late hour. She hurried over when she noticed the girl's flushed face. "Oh no, sweetheart, you don't look well," she said softly, crouching down to touch her forehead. Her hand was gentle, and her brow furrowed in concern. "She's burning up," the waitress said, glancing at the father. "It could just be a common fever. But let's help her feel better." The billionaire felt oddly relieved just hearing her speak with such calmness. She led them to a booth in the corner and brought a glass of water with lemon slices. She told the girl to sip slowly, then disappeared into the kitchen and returned with a small bowl of broth. "This helps when you're sick. My mom used to make it for us," she explained. The little girl took a few spoonfuls, her face relaxing slightly. She leaned against the waitress, who rubbed her back slowly. The billionaire sat across from them, watching in silence. It struck him again how naturally this woman cared for his child, as though it was the most important thing in the world. The waitress then brought out a small cloth soaked in cool water and gently pressed it against the girl's forehead. "This will help bring the fever down," she said softly. She hummed quietly, an old lullaby perhaps, and the child's eyelids grew heavy. Within minutes, she was dozing peacefully against her shoulder. The billionaire swallowed hard. He had the resources to buy the best medicine, the finest treatments, yet here in this simple diner booth, his daughter seemed more comforted than anywhere else. He finally spoke, his voice low. "You didn't have to do all this." The waitress looked at him, shaking her head. "She needed it. That's all that matters." Her words carried no expectation, no judgment, just a simple truth. For the next hour, she stayed by the girl's side, refreshing the cloth on her forehead, checking her temperature with her hand, and making sure she drank water. The billionaire offered to call a doctor, but the waitress reassured him, "If it gets worse, you should. But right now, she just needs rest and care. Children are stronger than they look." The billionaire leaned back, watching her. He had spent years building empires, negotiating deals worth billions, yet he felt powerless when it came to his daughter's needs. This young woman, with none of his resources, had stepped in effortlessly. As the diner quieted, with only a few customers lingering, the waitress continued to sit with the child. She shared stories softly, almost to herself, about how her younger sister used to get sick often, and how she had learned simple remedies to help her feel better. Her voice was calm, filled with a kind of wisdom that came not from books or doctors, but from lived experience. The billionaire listened, realizing how little he truly knew about caring for his own child. He had left most of it to nannies and professionals, thinking that money ensured the best care. But tonight showed him something different. Children needed love, patience, and someone willing to sit beside them through the hard moments. When the little girl stirred and mumbled in her sleep, the waitress stroked her hair and whispered, "You're safe. Rest now." The billionaire's chest tightened again. Those were the words he should have been saying. After a while, the fever seemed to settle. The girl's cheeks lost some of their redness, and her breathing grew steady. The waitress smiled softly, looking at the father. "See? She's already getting better." He nodded slowly, gratitude filling him in a way he couldn't quite express. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. "You don't need to," she replied simply. "She's a wonderful little girl. Anyone would do the same." But he knew that wasn't true. Not everyone would. He himself had almost called a doctor instead of comforting her. It had taken his daughter's trust to bring them here to this moment, as they prepared to leave. The girl, half asleep in her father's arms, whispered, "She made me feel better, Daddy." Those sleepy words struck him deeply. He nodded, holding his daughter closer, silently vowing to do better. That night, when they reached home, he sat beside his daughter's bed long after she fell asleep. He thought about the waitress's patience, about how she never once acted as though it was a burden. He realized he had been distant for too long, hiding behind work and money. He wanted to change. He needed to change. Over the next few days, the billionaire found himself trying. He put his phone down more often, joined his daughter on the floor while she played with her toys, and listened when she spoke about little things that used to slip past him. She noticed, too. Her laughter became brighter, her hugs tighter. But he also kept thinking about the waitress. Not just because she had helped his daughter, but because she had unknowingly reminded him of what mattered most. She had shown him that care wasn't measured by wealth, but by presence. One evening, he told his daughter, "You know, she's taught me something important." The girl tilted her head curiously. "What?" "That love isn't about what you buy or give. It's about being there. And I want to be there more for you." The little girl smiled and hugged him tightly. "That's all I wanted, Daddy." Her words filled him with both joy and guilt. He realized how close he had come to losing these moments by burying himself in work. But now, because of one ordinary waitress who had stepped in without hesitation, was seeing life differently. The billionaire knew he couldn't change overnight, but he was determined. He wanted to be the father his daughter needed, the kind who didn't just show up at the park distracted, but who ran to catch her when she fell, dotted in the back of his mind. He silently thanked the young woman who had sparked this change without even realizing it. Weeks passed since that evening at the diner. But the billionaire couldn't shake the memory of the young waitress and the way she had cared for his daughter. He found himself thinking about her, not in terms of business or status, but in terms of human kindness, something he realized he had overlooked for far too long. His daughter, of course, continued to ask to visit the diner, and he didn't resist anymore. The moment they walked through the door again, the familiar jingling of the bell and the smell of warm food greeted them. The waitress looked up from the counter and smiled, a recognition that carried warmth. The little girl ran straight to her, throwing her arms around the woman's waist. The billionaire followed slowly, noticing how natural it felt to be there. Almost like stepping into a second home rather than a restaurant, as they sat down at the usual booth. The little girl chattered nonstop, telling the waitress about her week at school, the game she had played, and even the little arguments she had with friends. The billionaire listened quietly, occasionally glancing at her, and noticed something he had never seen before. His daughter's eyes sparkled with joy when she spoke to someone who genuinely cared. The waitress leaned down to respond, her attention fully on the child, nodding, laughing, and offering small advice. The billionaire couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. He had spent so many years giving his daughter everything except his full attention. Money could buy toys, vacations, tutors, and even luxuries that most people only dream of, but it could not replace the simple human touch she had received from this young woman. He realized that the playground hug had been more than just a comforting gesture. It had been a lesson, not only for his daughter but for himself. He had seen how powerful genuine care could be, and now he wanted to embody it in his own life. After lunch, the little girl suggested they play outside in the small park behind the diner. The billionaire agreed, putting his phone away and letting her run ahead. He watched her climb, swing, and laugh, fully immersed in the moment, without thinking about calls or meetings. Every time she fell or tripped slightly, he was there not to scold. Not to rush her, but to catch her gently and make sure she felt safe. The waitress came outside during her short break and waved. The little girl ran over, hugging her again. The billionaire observed quietly, noticing how effortlessly she connected with children, how she knew exactly when to offer comfort, when to encourage, and when to just smile and let them be. He realized that her strength wasn't about physical power or wealth, but about heart and presence. That evening, after they returned home, he tucked his daughter into bed with a new understanding. He stayed for a few minutes longer than usual, listening to her little stories, asking questions about her day and laughing at her jokes. He remembered how the waitress had done the same things, only with the natural ease of someone who cared deeply. Over the next few weeks, he made a conscious effort to spend more time with his daughter. They built puzzles together, read stories, and even cooked simple meals. He realized that these moments were more precious than any deal he had ever closed. He was learning patience, presence, and the subtle art of understanding someone else's feelings, skills he had never mastered in the boardroom. But the influence of the waitress didn't stop at his relationship with his daughter. He also began thinking about her life, the challenges she faced, and the selflessness she displayed every day. One afternoon, he decided to visit the diner not just with his daughter, but also to offer help in a way that didn't feel like charity. He spoke to her quietly, expressing a desire to support her goals and ease some of the burdens she carried. Without patronizing her or interfering with her independence, the waitress, initially hesitant, listened carefully. She had never expected recognition or assistance from someone like him, but she appreciated the sincerity in his offer. He promised to respect her space, only helping in ways she truly needed. She smiled, grateful, and touched, but insisted she could manage most things herself. Meanwhile, his daughter grew increasingly fond of the waitress. She would often talk about her at school, describe her bravery, and recount the small lessons she had learned from her. The little girl understood the value of kindness and hard work, and it was shaping her in ways the billionaire could hardly measure. One day, as they sat in the diner, the billionaire watched the waitress serve a table with skill and warmth. Children laughed nearby, couples enjoyed quiet meals, and older patrons chatted at the counter. He thought about how simple, ordinary moments could carry extraordinary meaning. A hug, a kind word, a few minutes of genuine attention, it could change a child's life. And even the life of a father who had lost touch with what mattered most. The little girl leaned across the table and said, "Daddy, remember when I fell at the playground?" "She made me feel better," he nodded, feeling a lump in his throat. "I remember," he said softly, "and I'll never forget it." From that day on, the billionaire made a commitment. He would be present in his daughter's life, not just in moments of danger or illness, but in everyday joys and small discoveries. He realized that love was not measured by wealth, gifts, or status, but by attention, care, and consistency. He continued to visit the diner occasionally, always respecting the waitress's life and work, but also maintaining a bond built on genuine admiration. They became friends, not because of what he could give, but because of mutual respect and shared human experience. The girl, happy and thriving, had unknowingly brought two very different worlds together, the world of privilege and the world of simple, heartfelt care, the playground hug. Once a small and fleeting moment had become a turning point. It had reshaped the billionaire's understanding of family, love, and responsibility. It had taught him that being a father required presence more than money, patience more than power, and love more than anything else he could buy. And so, in the months that followed, life changed. The billionaire spent more time with his daughter, not as a figure of wealth and authority, but as a caring parent. He laughed with her, guided her, and shared in her simple joys. The waitress continued her work, quietly influencing the lives around her, unaware that her small acts of kindness had created ripples far beyond her imagination. At the end of it all, what began with a fall on a playground had led to transformation. A father became present in his daughter's life. A child learned the value of genuine care, and a young woman's simple act of kindness reminded everyone that true wealth is measured in love, attention, and human connection. The billionaire would never forget that day, nor the waitress who had shown him that the greatest gifts in life are often the simplest, given freely and received with gratitude. And as he watched his daughter grow, he knew that her heart and his own had been shaped forever by that one small, extraordinary hug.